Dad said you're not welcome here anymore. Those were the words my 13-year-old son said through the security intercom while I stood outside the house I helped build, holding a pink gift bag with my daughter's birthday present inside. For a second, I honestly thought I'd heard him wrong. The October wind cut across the driveway, cold enough to sting my cheeks, and the camera above the garage blinked red while I stared at my own reflection in the polished black screen beside the front door. I could hear music inside. Laughter too. Sophie's birthday party had already started. 12 girls running around the backyard, pop music drifting through the open patio doors, somebody grilling burgers near the pool. The kind of suburban family scene I used to think would last forever. I pressed the button again. Liam, I said softly, trying not to sound shaken. Honey, it's Mom. Silence crackled through the speaker. Then I heard movement, muffled voices, and finally my ex-husband Ethan somewhere in the background saying something too low for me to make out. Liam came back on a second later, his voice flatter this time, colder somehow. Dad said you make everything worse when you show up. The line went dead after that. I just stood there. 52 degrees outside, hands trembling around a birthday gift wrapped in lavender paper. Staring at the stone walkway I picked out myself 8 years earlier when Ethan and I remodeled the front yard. The hydrangeas near the porch were blooming crooked because nobody remembered to rotate them toward the sun the way I used to. Funny the things your mind notices when your heart is breaking. Across the street, one of the neighbors glanced through her curtains before quickly looking away. People in our neighborhood had mastered that move over the past year. The polite avoidance. The silent judgment. Ethan made sure everyone heard his version of the story before I even understood my own life was falling apart. According to him, I abandoned my family. According to him, I became unstable after the divorce. According to him, the kids were safer with him. Funny thing about lies. If you repeat them calmly enough, people start calling them truth. I tightened my grip on the gift bag and walked back toward my car before anyone else could see me standing there like some stranger trespassing outside her own life. My old Honda was parked halfway down the street because Ethan had changed the gate code months ago. The leather seat felt freezing when I climbed inside. For a minute, I couldn't even start the engine. I just sat there staring through the windshield at the second-floor bedroom window where Sophie used to tape drawings for me after school. There were no drawings now, just white curtains and warm yellow light. Then the front door opened. My breath caught instantly. A tall blonde woman stepped onto the porch holding a tray of cupcakes. Vanessa Cole, Ethan's girlfriend. No, not girlfriend. The woman he left me for. She wore gray leggings and one of Ethan's old college sweatshirts like she belonged there her whole life. She leaned down to say something to Sophie, and my daughter laughed before wrapping her arms around Vanessa's waist. I felt something inside me go painfully still. Not rage, not jealousy, just this awful hollow feeling, like someone had quietly removed me from my own family while I was still alive to watch it happen. Vanessa looked out toward the street for one brief second. Our eyes met through my windshield. She didn't smile, didn't wave. She just turned around and went back inside my house while the door closed behind her. The first time Ethan told people I was unstable, he said it with his hand resting gently on my shoulder like he was some exhausted man carrying a burden nobody else understood. That was the genius of it. He never yelled, never acted cruel in public. He spoke softly, calmly, like a concerned husband trying to protect his children from a woman slowly falling apart. By the time I realized what he was doing, the story had already spread through our entire town like smoke under a locked door. 3 months after the divorce papers were finalized, I stopped going to the grocery store on Sunday mornings because people looked at me differently there. You can feel judgment before anyone opens their mouth. It hangs in the air. The cashier who suddenly avoids eye contact. The neighbors who stop talking when you walk down the aisle. The fake sympathetic smiles that last half a second too long. I became one of those women suburban neighborhoods whisper about while pretending they are praying for her. Ethan made sure of that. According to him, I abandoned my responsibilities as a wife. According to him, I became emotionally unpredictable after losing my marketing job during the pandemic. According to him, the children were confused and needed stability only he could provide. Stability. Funny word coming from a man who had been sleeping with another woman for years. I found that out later. Back then, I still believed the divorce had happened because we grew apart. That is the dangerous thing about decent people. We assume honesty exists in others because it exists in us. My apartment sat 20 minutes away from the old neighborhood in a complex beside Interstate 35, where the walls were thin enough to hear strangers arguing at night. The place smelled faintly like bleach and old carpet no matter how many candles I lit. I went from a 4-bedroom colonial house with vaulted ceilings to 700 square feet and a parking lot view. Every evening around 6:05, headlights swept across my living room window from the traffic outside, and for months I kept thinking one of those cars might be Ethan bringing the kids to see me. Most nights, nobody came. Liam stopped answering my texts first, then Sophie. At first the messages were short. Busy tonight. Maybe next week. Dad says we already have plans. Eventually, even those disappeared. I would still send them things anyway. Little photos from their childhood. Old memories. The blueberry pancakes Liam used to demand every Saturday morning. Sophie asleep on my chest after her kindergarten recital, wearing glitter on her eyelids. Hours would pass with no response. One night, I sat on my kitchen floor eating takeout lo mein straight from the carton while scrolling through Vanessa's social media page like some pathetic detective trying to understand how another woman stepped into my life so completely. There was a photo of Sophie smiling beside Vanessa at a nail salon downtown. Another one showed Liam helping Ethan grill steaks on the patio I designed myself. Vanessa captioned it, "Family night." I stared at that word until the screen blurred. Family. As if the last 16 years of my life had been erased and replaced with a cleaner version everyone liked better. My chest felt tight all the time back then. Not dramatic. Not movie scene heartbreak. Just this constant pressure sitting beneath my ribs like my body understood something my mind still refused to accept. I had not only lost my marriage. I was being slowly edited out of my own children's memories. And the worst part was how believable Ethan made it look. He volunteered at Sophie's school now. Packed lunches. Posted inspirational parenting quotes online. People praised him constantly. Such a devoted father. Such a strong man after everything he went through. Sometimes I wanted to scream the truth at somebody. Instead, I folded laundry in silence and listened to 18-wheelers groan down the interstate outside my apartment window while my old life continued without me. The first time I walked back into the house after the divorce, it smelled different. Not bad, just unfamiliar. Like somebody had opened all the windows and let another woman's life settle into the walls. Ethan invited me over on a Thursday afternoon because Liam had forgotten his asthma medication in my car after one of the rare weekends he actually agreed to see me. I remember sitting in the driveway for almost 2 full minutes before getting out. My hand stayed locked around the steering wheel while the engine ticked softly in the Texas heat. 91 degrees outside, and somehow I still felt cold. The house looked exactly the same from the street. White brick, black shutters. The oak tree near the mailbox starting to lose leaves earlier than usual. But the second I stepped through the front door, I knew it was no longer mine. There were tiny changes everywhere. Vanilla-scented candles replacing the cedarwood ones I used to buy. Different throw pillows on the sectional. A gold bowl full of lemons sitting on the kitchen island where I once kept Sophie's school forms and grocery lists. The details hurt more than I expected. 20 years of marriage reduced to decorative replacement. Ethan called down from upstairs that Liam was getting dressed for baseball practice. His voice sounded casual, comfortable, like I was some distant relative stopping by for a quick errand instead of the woman who spent half her life building that home beside him. I stood awkwardly near the staircase holding the inhaler in one hand while sunlight spilled across the hardwood floors I spent months choosing during renovations. Then I heard laughter upstairs. A woman's laugh. Light. Familiar. Vanessa appeared at the top of the staircase wearing pale gray leggings and one of Ethan's oversized college sweatshirts hanging loose off her shoulder. My stomach tightened instantly because I recognized the sweatshirt. University of Texas. Burnt orange lettering faded from years of washing. I bought it for Ethan during our 10th anniversary trip to Austin. She smiled politely when she saw me standing there. Not smug exactly. Worse. Comfortable. Like she belonged. "Hey Claire," she said softly, brushing blonde hair behind her ear. "Liam is almost ready." I do not remember what I answered. Maybe nothing. My eyes drifted past her toward the hallway wall where our family photos used to hang. They were gone. Every single one. In their place were minimalist black frames with abstract prints Vanessa probably ordered online. It looked like a staged home listing now. Beautiful. Empty. Ethan came downstairs a moment later, adjusting his watch like none of this was strange. "Thanks for bringing the inhaler," he said. "You could have just left it at the door, though." That sentence stayed with me for weeks afterward. You could have just left it at the door. Like I was dangerous to let inside too long. Liam finally came downstairs wearing his baseball uniform, taller than I remembered somehow. 14 already. His voice had started changing during the months he barely spoke to me. He grabbed the inhaler from my hand without meeting my eyes. "Thanks," he muttered quietly. Before I could ask about school or baseball practice or literally anything mothers are supposed to ask their children, Vanessa stepped into the kitchen and called out, "Snack bags are on the counter, honey." Honey. The word landed softly, but it cut deeper than yelling ever could. Liam nodded toward her automatically. Familiar. Comfortable. Like the routine had already been there for years. Sophie ran through the living room a second later, carrying a dance bag nearly bigger than she was. She stopped cold when she saw me standing there. For one brief second, I saw my little girl again underneath all the distance Ethan had built between us. Her eyes widened. Her mouth almost smiled. Then Ethan cleared his throat quietly behind me, and whatever warmth had flickered across her face disappeared just as fast. "We are late," he said calmly. Sophie lowered her eyes and walked past me toward the garage without saying a word. The front door opened. Sunlight poured in. Then they all left together while I stood alone in the middle of the kitchen staring at a bowl of lemons that did not belong in my house. There is a certain kind of exhaustion that only women like me understand. Not dramatic exhaustion. Not the kind people post about online beside inspirational quotes and spa photos. I mean the quiet kind. The kind that settles into your bones after years of making everybody else's life easier while slowly disappearing from your own. Looking back now, I think I started erasing myself long before Ethan ever left me. Maybe that is why I missed the warning signs. 20 years ago, I was the ambitious one. I had a marketing degree from Baylor, a tiny downtown office with exposed brick walls, and clients that actually respected my ideas. I loved the work, loved the pace of it, the brainstorming meetings, the coffee runs before presentations, the feeling of building something with my own name attached to it. Then Liam was born 6 weeks early during a thunderstorm that knocked power out across half the city, and suddenly my whole world narrowed to a hospital monitor blinking beside a 4-pound baby fighting to breathe. Ethan held my hand that night and promised we would always be partners. I believed him completely. 2 years later, Sophie arrived with red cheeks and a scream loud enough to shake the maternity ward windows. By then, Ethan's business had started growing fast. Longer hours, bigger contracts, more travel. Somebody had to stay steady for the children, so naturally that became me. I told myself it was temporary. I would pause my career for a few years, help build stability at home, then return once the kids were older. Women tell themselves stories like that all the time. Sometimes we even believe them. The years passed quietly after that. School lunches at 6:30 in the morning. Laundry humming late at night. Volunteer meetings. Pediatrician appointments. Soccer cleats lined beside the front door. I became the person who remembered everything so everybody else could forget. Ethan used to joke that I was the engine holding the family together. Funny thing about engines. Most people only notice them once they stop working. When his company nearly collapsed during the recession 15 years ago, I sold my mother's diamond bracelet without telling anyone. Vintage white gold. The only expensive thing she left me after cancer took her. I sat in a pawn shop 30 miles away because I could not bear the idea of someone local watching me hand it over. The man behind the counter weighed it carefully under fluorescent lights while country music played softly through a crackling speaker overhead. I remember staring at my reflection in the glass display case, thinking how tired I looked for 37. The bracelet paid 2 months of payroll for Ethan's employees. He cried when I handed him the envelope that night. Actually cried. Pressed his forehead against mine in the kitchen and whispered, "I will never forget this, Claire." That memory haunted me after the divorce more than the betrayal itself. Because he did forget. Completely. Somewhere between promotions and country club dinners and corporate retreats, the version of Ethan who once looked at me like I mattered disappeared so slowly I barely noticed it happening. The hardest part is that I did not even resent the sacrifices back then. I loved my children. I loved my husband. I thought devotion worked like a savings account. You pour enough loyalty into a marriage, and eventually safety grows from it. But life does not always return what you invest. Sometimes it simply takes one night, Months after moving into the apartment, I opened an old storage bin searching for winter blankets and found a crayon drawing Sophie made in second grade. Four stick figures standing beside a yellow house under a crooked blue sky. At the top she had written in shaky letters, "My family is my safe place." I sat on the floor holding that paper for almost an hour while 18-wheelers rattled the windows outside. Because somewhere along the way, I stopped being part of the picture. The truth finally reached me on a Tuesday night through a voicemail Ethan never meant for me to hear. Funny how entire lives fall apart now. Not with dramatic confrontations or lipstick on collars. Just tiny digital mistakes. A forwarded file. A missed notification. A voice traveling through a phone speaker while somebody forgets technology remembers everything. It started raining around 9 that night. Hard Texas rain hammering against the apartment windows while I sat cross-legged on the floor folding laundry beside an old movie playing quietly in the background. My phone buzzed once beside me. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Then another buzz came immediately after. New voicemail received. I remember wiping fabric softener off my hands before pressing play. At first there was only muffled movement. Glasses clinking somewhere. Music faint in the background. Restaurant noise maybe. Then Ethan's voice drifted through the speaker, relaxed and careless in a way I had not heard in years. "No, she still believes the depression angle," he said with a low laugh. My hand stopped moving instantly. The room suddenly felt smaller. "The therapist reports helped," another voice answered. "Female. Vanessa, especially with the custody mediator." Silence followed for a second before Ethan spoke again. "Honestly, once the kids started pulling away from her, the rest became easy." I did not breathe. I do not think I even blinked. Rain streaked down the apartment window beside me while my own husband talked about dismantling my life like he was discussing lawn maintenance. "Liam barely questions anything now," Ethan continued. "Teenage boys follow stability. And Sophie just copies him." Vanessa laughed softly. Still unbelievable, she handed over everything that easily. Ethan's answer came without hesitation. "Claire trusts people too much. That was always her weakness." I replayed that voicemail at least 20 times that night. Maybe more. Every replay peeled another layer off the illusion I had been desperately clinging to. There had been no mutual drifting apart. No tragic breakdown of communication. No sudden emotional distance neither of us could explain. He planned it. Carefully. Quietly. The therapist he recommended during our separation suddenly made sense now. Dr. Melissa Grant. Warm smile. Neutral office. Framed watercolor paintings on pale gray walls. She spent months asking me if I felt emotionally overwhelmed. If I struggled with anxiety. If I ever felt exhausted balancing motherhood and stress. I thought she was helping me process the divorce. I did not realize Ethan was using my own vulnerability as evidence against me later. The worst part was remembering how often I apologized during those sessions. Women do that constantly. We apologize even while drowning. I started seeing things differently after the voicemail. Tiny moments I once dismissed suddenly rearranged themselves into something ugly and deliberate. Ethan encouraging me to rest more whenever I cried. Ethan quietly handling conversations with the children whenever conflict happened. Ethan insisting I take sleeping medication during the worst months of our marriage because I seemed emotionally drained. I used to think he was concerned about me. Now I realized he had been building a version of me everybody else would eventually believe. Fragile, unstable, difficult, easy to replace. Around midnight, I opened my laptop and searched through old emails with trembling fingers. Thousands of messages filled the screen. School calendars, grocery lists, mortgage paperwork. 20 years of ordinary life buried in digital dust. Then I found it. A hotel confirmation forwarded accidentally into Ethan's archived family folder nearly 18 months before the divorce. 2 guests. 1 king bed. Downtown Austin. The weekend, he told me he was attending a leadership conference. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. Outside, headlights smeared through rainwater across the interstate, while thunder rolled low over the city. Somewhere in another part of town, Ethan was probably asleep beside Vanessa in the house I once called home. Safe, comfortable, certain he had rewritten the story successfully. But for the first time since the divorce, something inside me shifted quietly into place. Not revenge, not anger, just clarity, cold and sharp as broken glass. After the voicemail, I stopped chasing explanations and started paying attention instead. There is a difference. Explanations are emotional. Attention is cold, quiet, precise. And once I finally saw Ethan clearly, little cracks began appearing everywhere around him. The first sign came through Liam. He called me unexpectedly one Saturday afternoon while I was standing in line at a grocery store holding a carton of eggs and a loaf of sourdough bread. His voice sounded tense, distracted. "Can I stay with you tonight?" he asked quietly. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. It had been almost 4 months since he asked to spend extra time with me voluntarily. "Of course," I answered too quickly. Then softer. "Everything okay?" Silence hummed through the phone. In the background, I heard a door slam somewhere. Then Vanessa's voice floated faintly through the receiver, sharp enough to cut through static. "I am not cleaning up after your kids again, Ethan." Liam lowered his voice immediately. "I just want to get out of here for a night." The words settled heavily inside my chest during the drive to pick him up. The neighborhood looked identical as always. Perfect lawns, white fences, expensive SUVs lined neatly along the curb. But tension has a way of leaking through even the prettiest places. When Liam climbed into my car, he looked older somehow. Dark circles under his eyes, hoodie wrinkled, baseball duffel tossed carelessly into the back seat. He did not hug me. Still, when he shut the passenger door, relief crossed his face so quickly it almost broke my heart. We drove for nearly 10 minutes before he finally spoke again. "They fight a lot now." I kept my eyes on the road. "About what?" Liam stared out the window toward the highway traffic sliding past. "Money mostly." The word surprised me. Ethan had always worshipped financial control. During our marriage, he tracked every expense down to grocery receipts and utility bills. Stability mattered to him almost obsessively. Hearing that things were becoming unstable inside that house felt strange. Unreal. Liam shrugged one shoulder awkwardly. "Vanessa keeps buying stuff. Like all the time. New furniture. Trips. Some weird fitness startup she invested in." He rubbed his forehead tiredly. "Dad gets mad, but then acts normal again the next day." That night, Liam fell asleep on my couch around 11 with a bowl of popcorn balanced on his chest while an old baseball game played softly on television. I stood in the kitchen doorway watching him breathe for a long moment because mothers notice things other people miss. The tightness in his jaw even while sleeping. The exhaustion under his eyes. Children absorb tension like walls absorb cigarette smoke. Quietly. Completely. A week later, Sophie called crying after dance practice because nobody came to pick her up on time. I found her sitting alone outside the studio beneath a flickering parking lot light, hugging her dance bag against her chest while rain drizzled softly across the pavement. The second she climbed into my car, she wiped her eyes quickly like she was embarrassed to need me. "Dad forgot," she whispered. Then after a pause she added, "Vanessa thought he was picking me up." I handed her a sweatshirt from the back seat and pretended not to notice her hands shaking slightly. On the drive home, she talked nonstop about school gossip and dance rehearsals the way children do when they are trying to avoid talking about what actually hurts. But somewhere between traffic lights and windshield wipers, she suddenly asked, "Did you and Dad fight this much before the divorce?" The question hit quietly, like a bruise pressed in exactly the wrong place. "No," I answered honestly. Sophie stared down at her lap for several seconds. "They yell even when we are eating dinner now." Outside, thunder rolled low across the city skyline, while brake lights smeared red across the wet highway. I kept both hands steady on the steering wheel, even though something inside me had started shifting again. Ethan spent years convincing everyone he had escaped chaos by leaving me. But chaos was creeping into his life anyway. Slowly, patiently, like water finding cracks beneath a foundation. The collapse started quietly. That is the thing nobody tells you about karma. It rarely arrives like lightning. Most of the time it slips in through tiny cracks people ignored for too long. I first heard about Ethan's problems through a woman named Denise whose husband worked at the same investment firm Ethan partnered with during the expansion of his company. We ran into each other by accident at a pharmacy one Sunday afternoon while I stood comparing allergy medications beneath harsh fluorescent lights. Denise lowered her voice the second she recognized me. "I probably should not say this," she whispered carefully, glancing around the aisle. "But things are getting messy over there." At first I thought she meant the divorce gossip still circling town. Then she mentioned missing accounts, investors pulling back, internal audits. My stomach tightened slowly as she spoke. Ethan built his entire identity around control. Hearing words like messy attached to his name felt almost impossible. Denise hesitated before adding one more thing. Apparently, Vanessa has been heavily involved lately. That sentence followed me all the way home. A few days later, Sophie confirmed more without realizing she was doing it. She sat at my kitchen counter eating microwave macaroni while scrolling silently through her phone. The apartment smelled faintly like butter and detergent from the laundromat downstairs. Outside, traffic rolled steadily past the interstate exit ramps while evening sunlight turned the blinds gold. "Dad is mad all the time now," she said suddenly without looking up. I stirred my coffee slowly. "About work?" Sophie shrugged. "Mostly Vanessa." The way she said the name carried exhaustion no 13-year-old should know. "She keeps telling him they deserve more." Sophie mimicked the phrase with quiet bitterness. "Bigger house, better vacations, new memberships. She says successful people are supposed to look successful." I looked down at my coffee before she could see the sadness crossing my face. Because deep down, I already understood what Ethan was learning too late. Vanessa never fell in love with stability. She fell in love with access. The signs became impossible to ignore after that. Ethan stopped posting online almost entirely. No more polished family photos. No more motivational business quotes. The country club rumors grew louder too. Failed deals. Late payments. Staff turnover. Somebody even mentioned federal compliance investigators reviewing financial reports connected to one of Ethan's partnerships. I never asked questions directly. I did not need to. The truth has a way of surfacing on its own when enough pressure builds underneath it. Then one rainy Thursday night, Liam called me again. His voice sounded shaky this time. "Can you come get us?" he asked quietly. No attitude. No distance. Just fear. My chest tightened instantly. What happened? There was movement in the background. A door slamming hard somewhere upstairs. Sophie crying faintly. Then Liam answered in a low voice that barely sounded like him. "Vanessa left." I grabbed my keys immediately. Rain hammered across the windshield during the drive, while windshield wipers struggled to keep up. The house looked darker than usual when I pulled into the driveway. No porch lights. No music. No polished suburban perfection. Just Ethan sitting alone on the front steps with both elbows resting on his knees while rain soaked through his dress shirt. For one strange second, he looked older than I remembered. Smaller too. Liam opened the front door before I even reached the porch. Sophie ran straight into my arms without hesitation, gripping my sweatshirt tightly while her whole body trembled. Ethan never looked up. "She took everything," he muttered finally toward the wet concrete beneath his shoes. His voice sounded hollow. "Empty. Money. Client files. Offshore account access." Thunder rolled low above the neighborhood, while rainwater streamed down the gutters beside us. I held Sophie against my chest and stared at the man who once convinced everyone I was the unstable one. The man who dismantled our marriage piece by piece so he could build a fantasy around another woman. And in the end, the woman he destroyed his family for had destroyed him even faster. The strangest part about watching Ethan fall apart was realizing I no longer wanted revenge. For months I thought that was what healing would look like. Some dramatic moment where he finally understood what he did to me. But standing in that dark kitchen while Sophie cried against my shoulder and rain tapped softly against the windows, all I felt was tired. Deep tired. The kind that settles into your bones after surviving something you never should have had to survive in the first place. I took the kids back to my apartment that night because Ethan barely seemed capable of speaking. He stayed sitting at the kitchen table staring at unopened mail scattered beside his phone while thunder rolled outside. I remember pausing at the front door before leaving. Part of me expected him to stop me. To apologize maybe. To finally say something honest after all these years. Instead, he just whispered, "I did not think she would do this." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because the tragedy of it felt unbearable. He spent years convincing everyone I was the unstable one while trusting a woman who treated loyalty like a business strategy. The apartment felt unusually warm when we walked in. Sophie curled up immediately beneath a blanket on the couch, while Liam stood awkwardly near the kitchen counter like he did not know what role he was supposed to play anymore. Child. Witness. Survivor. Maybe all three. I made grilled cheese sandwiches after midnight, because sometimes feeding people is the only thing you can do when emotions get too heavy for language. Butter hissed quietly in the frying pan, while the interstate hummed outside the windows. Nobody talked much. Eventually, Liam cleared his throat softly. Dad lied about a lot of things. The sentence hung there between us. Careful. Fragile. I set the spatula down slowly before turning toward him. His eyes stayed fixed on the countertop. I found emails, he continued quietly. Old ones. Sophie looked up from the couch immediately. Liam swallowed hard. Dad told us you stopped caring about us after the divorce. But the emails were all from you. His voice cracked slightly on the last word. You kept asking to see us. For a second the room blurred around me. Not dramatically, just enough that I had to grip the kitchen counter with one hand to steady myself. Sophie sat up slowly beneath the blanket, confusion spreading across her face. What emails? Liam pulled his phone from his hoodie pocket and opened something silently before handing it to her. I watched my daughter's expression change while she scrolled. Birthday messages. Holiday invitations. Simple texts asking about school concerts and dentist appointments and dance recitals. Ethan told them I forgot. Evidence of a mother trying desperately to stay connected while someone quietly erased her behind the scenes. Sophie's bottom lip trembled. He told us you stopped trying, she whispered. The pain in her voice cut deeper than anything Ethan ever did to me personally. Because children build themselves from what they believe about their parents. And Ethan poisoned that foundation slowly. Carefully, like smoke filling a room one breath at a time. Liam sat heavily at the kitchen table and rubbed both hands across his face. I thought you abandoned us. Hearing that nearly broke me. But I did not cry. Not yet. Years of survival had taught me emotions arrive safest once the emergency passes. I walked over slowly and touched his shoulder for the first time in what felt like forever. He did not pull away. Sophie crossed the room a second later and wrapped her arms around my waist so suddenly it knocked the air from my lungs. Her whole body shook while she cried into my sweatshirt. Why did not you fight harder for us? She asked through tears. That question hurt because there was no clean answer. I could explain manipulation, lies, legal threats, emotional exhaustion, but none of those things fully comfort children who spent years believing their mother stopped loving them. So instead I held her tighter and whispered the only truth that mattered anymore. I never stopped trying to come back to you. 6 months later, the apartment no longer felt temporary. That surprised me more than anything. Healing does not usually arrive with dramatic music or life-changing speeches. Most of the time it slips quietly into ordinary moments until one day you realize you are breathing differently, sleeping differently, living differently. By spring, Liam had started leaving his baseball gear by my front door again like he used to when he was little. Sophie filled the refrigerator with dance recital magnets and sticky notes covered in glitter pen handwriting. The place still sat beside Interstate 35. Trucks still rattled the windows at night. But now there was laughter inside too. Real laughter. Careless laughter. The kind that had been missing from my life for years without me fully noticing. I found a small townhouse on the north side of the city around that time. Nothing extravagant. 2 stories. Pale blue shutters. Tiny backyard with a crooked bird feeder someone forgot to take down before selling the place. The kitchen counters were outdated and the upstairs carpet needed replacing, but the first time I unlocked the front door, something inside me loosened quietly. It felt safe. That was the word. Safe. Not impressive. Not luxurious. Just peaceful. The kids helped me move in over one long Saturday, while country music played through a portable speaker and cardboard boxes crowded every hallway. Sophie spent an hour arranging candles in the living room while Liam pretended not to care about decorating before secretly fixing the crooked curtain rod himself. At one point I stood in the middle of the kitchen surrounded by half-unpacked dishes and suddenly realized nobody was walking on eggshells anymore. No tension humming beneath conversations. No careful emotional calculations before speaking. Just people existing together without fear. Ethan called twice during those months. The first time I let it ring until voicemail picked up. His voice sounded tired. Smaller somehow. He said he wanted to explain things. The second call came late one evening while I stood slicing tomatoes for dinner. Unknown number flashing across the screen while garlic simmered softly on the stove and Sophie argued with Liam upstairs about whose turn it was to feed the dog we had recently adopted from a shelter downtown. Funny how life keeps moving even after devastation. I stared at the phone while it buzzed against the counter. Somewhere out there Ethan was probably sitting alone in the ruins of the life he spent years trying to control. Investigations into his company were still ongoing according to gossip around town. Several partnerships collapsed after Vanessa disappeared with financial records and private client information. People who once praised Ethan publicly now avoided saying his name altogether. Reputation works like that. Slowly built, quickly shattered. The phone buzzed again, then stopped. I wiped my hands on a kitchen towel and looked around the house instead. Evening sunlight spilled through the dining room windows in soft golden lines across the hardwood floor. Sophie laughed upstairs. Liam shouted something back. The dog barked once near the staircase. Ordinary sounds. Beautiful sounds. Sounds that used to belong to somebody else's life when I sat alone crying in that apartment beside the interstate wondering if my children would ever find their way back to me. I picked up the cutting board and carried sliced tomatoes to the table while the silence from the unanswered phone settled gently behind me. Because the truth is, Ethan did take almost everything for a while. My marriage, my home, my reputation, even my children's trust. But in the end, the only person he truly destroyed was himself. And for the first time in years, standing there beneath the warm kitchen light with my children laughing somewhere nearby, I realized I no longer needed anyone to lose for me to finally feel whole again.